there! Welcome to Coffee with Connie. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. So, as I try to do every couple of times a week, I try to talk about things that people have questions about with respect to real estate. Sometimes there are things that actually happen in our office on a regular basis, or things that come up while we're working on home closings for people. And today I wanted to talk about property rights and home ownership and buying a house and adding somebody to the title and how that all works, what that means, how that affects you once you walk away from that closing. And let me say, if you're checking in or if you're on watching us live, please check in and say, hey, let me know you're there. I really appreciate your time. I know that we all have busy mornings and I appreciate you being there. Hey there, Mariana. How are you today? If you're tuning in and you find something that we talk about valuable, please hit share. All you have to do is hit the share button on here and you can share it with people that are in your network, because that way they can get the information that we're trying to share as well. So it's my goal and my mission to make sure that you understand what the purpose of a title company is, what the value is they bring to the table, and make sure that you're protected. So hope you guys are having a great day. I know it's a little rainy and crazy, but hopefully you guys are having an awesome start to your Wednesday and the beginning or middle or whatever, wherever it happens to be in your week from the Memorial Day weekend. Hey there, Angela. How are you this morning? Thanks for tuning in and always being online. Hey, Craig. How are you? So today I wanted to talk about property owners' rights, because a lot of times people are going to closing first, second, third house or a piece of property, and someone may say to them, hey, you need to add someone to the ownership, or hey, they need to go on the mortgage with you so that you can qualify. And I want to just talk about how all that ownership works for a few minutes, because it's a little confusing. I mean, you're going through the process, buying a piece of property, and everybody's giving you thoughts and information on what you need to do to make everything smooth and to make the process happen. And you may not understand what all that means. And so we just want to talk about that for a minute. And not only just purchasing a piece of property, but maybe you want to do some additional financing on your property and you have to, the lender saying that you need to add someone or remove someone from the ownership to be able to do that. And so I just wanted to talk about some of those issues for a minute, because, well, I shouldn't say issues, some of those situations, because they may not fully be clear to you on what the overall ramifications are. So I just want to talk about that for a minute. And, you know, if you have questions while we're talking, feel free to pop in and let me know what those are as well. And I'd love to help you answer those questions. Or if you'd rather not answer them in the public forum, then reach out to me individually. You can personal message me here through Facebook, and that's great. Hey, Phil, how are you this morning? So let's talk about first, you're buying a piece of property and the lender has said to you, hey, look, in order to qualify for this, you need to add such and such someone to the mortgage, to the ownership. And so maybe you are a first-time buyer and you're, you have the cash, your credit's okay, but as a young person, you got offered too many credit cards and weren't totally aware of the financial ramifications of all that. And so in order to buy this house, maybe you need to add your mom and dad, or your mom or your sister, or a significant other. Or maybe you're buying a piece of property and your significant other doesn't have qualifying income because they don't need it for your family life, but that, and so that spouse is not going to be added to the mortgage because it may affect the numbers. But the spouse obviously wants to be on the ownership, because if they're not added to the mortgage, then we have to figure out about adding them to the ownership. That spouse wants to definitely be on that ownership. So let's talk about that for a minute, that particular scenario first, and then we'll go into some other thoughts. But, you know, feel free to, like I said, ask some questions as we're talking. Hey, Kim, how are you? Good morning, Shannon. How are you? Thanks for what you did with the Memorial Day ride and with your daughter. That was really special. I enjoyed that post, and you're so creative, and I really appreciate all the things you do for the community. So just want to say thanks about that. So let's talk about, you're buying a piece of property, and let's say that it's a husband and wife, and the wife doesn't have some qualifying income, and the lender says, well, we don't want to add her to the mortgage, but she says, hey, I want to be on that ownership because I'm your spouse and I want to make sure that's taken care of. So let's talk about how that actually works. So most lenders will not add her to the qualifying portion of the mortgage. And I say her, could as well be him. It's just more common than it's her, but it could be either spouse, obviously, or it could be a same-sex marriage where they're, both gentlemen or both ladies. So it's just, qualifying, just saying what's most common. So that could be any of those situations. So let's say that the spouse doesn't have qualifying income. They're a stay-at-home parent, or they have a job that doesn't have a whole lot of income. So the mortgage lender says, hey, we're just going to do the loan in the one person's name that has the larger, more qualifying income. But the spouse says, I want to be on the ownership, because if something ever happens to you, that ownership would then automatically go directly to me, and I don't have to go through an estate process. So the lender would allow that spouse to be on the document that we record for the mortgage to secure the loan against the property. It's called a deed of trust. It's the document that actually is recorded in the land records that makes that loan stuck to that property or secured to that property. So we would add that person to that deed of trust and that deed, because if you only do the loan in one of the spouse's names and you do not add the other spouse to that deed, then if something happens to the spouse that is the only one on the ownership, then the other spouse has to go through an estate process if something happens to the spouse that's on the title. And that can be complicated. And when you're dealing with a death, the last thing you want to have to do is complicate things anymore. So that is one thing that we want to think about and talk about. Hey, Heather. Hey, Wendy. How are you this morning? Thank you guys for tuning in. So that's one way we want to think about it. So let's talk about another. Let's talk about when you are a single person, maybe it's your first home, and you have plenty of income, but maybe you had some credit blips, and the lender says, hey, in order to qualify for this loan, we need to add someone to the mortgage. Maybe it's a father or a mother, maybe it's a sister or a brother. That person is then going to be added to the ownership of your property, and we need to think about how that works and how it's going to affect your ownership if you ever want to do anything in the future. Now, that person's going to be listed as an owner of that property, and in order to do anything with that property, do a second mortgage, do a home equity loan, add someone else, remove someone else, the people on that title, on that deed, have to actually sign off on whatever you do in the future. So you have to understand when you're doing this closing and someone says you need to add this person or take this person off or not include this person, what those ramifications are. And the company that's doing your closing, the professionals, should be able to explain that to you and give you all of the advantages and disadvantages of those things. Now, let's talk about you don't have a mortgage, maybe, or you have a mortgage and you aren't at a closing situation, but you're thinking about doing some changes in your life, and those changes will affect your ownership as well. Let's say you own a piece of property and your parents are listed on the title to that piece of property, and you want to do a refinance on that property. Well, in order to do a refinance on that property, the parents are going to have to sign off on that new mortgage, or you're going to need to do a deed removing their names from the ownership, and they both have to sign off on that deed removing their ownership. Now, let's talk about some of those ramifications for a minute, because, it sounds easy. Yep, we're going to go do a deed taking the parents off, but is the property that's listed in that deed the only property that's in that ownership? It's on that deed? Maybe not. Maybe when you originally took ownership to that piece of property, you all purchased a big farm and then you divided it into pieces. That's called subdividing. So you divided it into pieces, and your house is here and your parents have a piece of property over here that's the remaining pieces, and you all are on all of those pieces, and you're in order to refinance your piece, you have to remove them from all of it or part of it. And so that is something to be thinking about as well, because removing them from all of it now takes away their ownership on the piece that they own. And if you, let's say, for example, you need to add someone else to qualify, like we were talking about adding parents or whomever. Maybe you have a girlfriend, you're going to get ready to get married, and you want to add that girlfriend to the ownership so you can qualify because she has really good credit, and you're removing the parents. Now the girlfriend has an ownership interest, the parents do not. Let's say you want to go back and add your parents. Your intention is, once you do the refinance, to add your parents back onto the ownership of the property so their property is secure. And let's say at that point, now you have just you and the girlfriend says, nope, not doing it. that girlfriend has the right to do that because now she's on the ownership of that property. So the only way to change the ownership of property is for the people that are listed on that deed to sign off on that deed. And then the other thing you need to think about is, how do you own it with those people? There's different ownership ways, and which gives you different rights. So if you're a married couple, you own it as tenants by the entirety, and both people own 100% of that property. So if something happens to one of them, then both of them have 100% ownership. So when something happens to one of them, the other one owns it completely. No one else can come in and claim an ownership interest, and they don't have to go through an estate process. For people that are not married, it can be one or however many people, two or however many people own it together. They can own it as what's called joint tenants, which gives them the same rights as a married couple. They all own it completely, and if something happens to one of them, then the remaining owners own 100% of the property and do not have to go through the estate process. Then there's called tenants in common. Tenants in common means each individual person owns a percentage interest. They can do what they want with their interest, and they also can deed out just their interest. So that is a divided piece, but if something happens to one of those tenants in common, then their interest goes into their estate, and the remaining people would own that property with those that would have an ownership interest in the estate. So I know it's a lot to digest and a lot to think about, but if you're buying a piece of property or refinancing and you're talking about doing, or someone's telling you that you need to do certain things with the ownership of that property, we should talk, because you want to make sure that you understand what those ramifications are, because when you walk away from the table, whoever is listed on that ownership of that property, those people must be involved in anything you do in the future with that property. So you might want to make sure that, you know, adding a girlfriend, adding a boyfriend, that you're really secure and comfortable that that's a good move, because everybody falls in and out of love and has potentially things when those situations arise that can become a little bit complicated. So you want to make sure that you're making the right decision for yourself going forward, whether it's next week, next month, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, that you understand what your ownership rights are. So hopefully I answered a couple of questions for you today. If not, please feel free to reach out to me, like I said, through this group, through this broadcast, or individually. Certainly you can private message me, you can email me, you can email anyone on our team in both Maryland and Virginia. They can answer all these questions for you. These rules that we're talking about are true across the country. This is not specific to our particular area. So if you're listening or viewing from across the country, these things would hold true for you as well. So hopefully I helped you with some information today. Hey Grace, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. I would really appreciate it if you'd hit the share button. That would help me so much, because then I can share information that I like to share with people that you know that I don't. Hope you guys have a fantastic Wednesday. I look forward to talking to you again real soon. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. Thanks for tuning in with Coffee with Connie. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.